Welcome to the Vintage Cinephile. I'm Rod Richards. In this show, we're going to be discussing the most interesting movies from past decades. In each episode, I'll present to you one older film that I think you should check out. You might be asking, why would I want to spend my time watching old movies? Many people seem to passively consume whatever is new and seem uninterested in anything that was made before they were born or before whatever they remember watching as a kid. I suspect that if you're watching this, you're probably not most people. One drawback I find with watching new movies as they come out is that very few of them are any good, and most of them are forgettable at best. So you end up wasting a lot of your time on things that you won't even remember in a year or so. But were movies really any better in the past? Well, let's think about it this way. The vast majority of movies made, say, 50 years ago were crap, just like today. The difference is that many older films that were thought to have little value at the time they were made have acquired an interesting patina over the years. When we watch older films, it's much easier to skip the mediocre stuff and find those diamonds in the rough. Also, depending on your age and experience, there's a ton of interesting stuff out there waiting to be discovered or rediscovered. We sometimes hear people describe certain older movies as dated, or that they don't hold up well. And what people usually mean by this is that the film doesn't conform to modern sensibilities, whatever that means to that person. This expression, dated, is almost always used pejoratively, but I find that much of what is fascinating in older films is this very quality of datedness. Watching movies from past generations helps us to realize that though politics, taboos, and fashionable ideas change with the wind, human nature doesn't. Learning to see past this notion of datedness can, among other things, help us learn to find common ground with people who, at first glance, may seem fundamentally different from us. As you may have guessed already, in this show, I'm not necessarily looking for the best older movies, whatever that means. I'm looking for the most interesting movies. And this distinction has some very important implications. We'll sometimes skip over certain classic movies in favor of some films that are bad, or at least bad as judged by most people. When we focus on what is interesting instead of what is good, we break free of our mental model of what a film is supposed to be, and this opens up a whole new world of possibilities for us. Though it might be interesting to know what the consensus view of a particular film is, what the film says to you is the only thing that matters. Some films are interesting because they explore timeless themes of human nature. Others are interesting because they capture the look and feel of a time or place that no longer exists. Some are outstanding examples of a particular genre. And others are interesting because they forever changed the way films were made. And some movies are worth watching just because they're pleasant to look at. For me, watching an older movie for the first time is kind of like traveling to a foreign country for the first time. It yanks me out of my normal everyday life and exposes me to something different, and that alone makes it worthwhile to me. The medium of film has only been around for a little over a century. But we live in a time of such mind-blowing technological and cultural change that even films from 50 years ago almost seem to have been made on another planet. The social, political, and cultural differences that we notice in older movies helps us to reflect on our own time with more objectivity. Movies and television have always contained tropes, stereotypes, and cultural biases characteristic of the culture that was dominant when and where they were made, and often outright propaganda imposed from above. But I argue that noticing these things in older movies helps us to spot the rampant cultural biases and propaganda that permeate today's culture that might otherwise escape our notice. The mass appeal that cinema has enjoyed has meant that it has been subject to more censorship and political manipulation than, say, literature or theater. And many films from just a few decades ago simply couldn't be made today due to censorship in one form or another. Returning to our foreign travel analogy, think about the most memorable trips you've taken in your life. For some people, a great trip means going to the same beach house with your family every summer. For others, it might be going to an all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean where all your needs are met. For me, though, my most memorable trips were the ones where I was kind of out of my element, maybe even lost. Those trips that didn't quite go as I planned and had some rough edges, but that changed me in some way. Some of my very best trips were mixtures of pleasant surprises, confusion, and a near disaster or two. The experience of watching an interesting older film can be almost like a 2-hour visit to a foreign country. It immediately pulls you out of your familiar surroundings and thus enhances your perception of reality. Like any form of art, cinema can make you question your values or reinforce values you already had. Some of them may teach you something new about history, culture, geography, or politics. Other films may introduce you to a new author or director, and sometimes you end up being inspired to read the novel, play, or short story that the film was based on. Some films provoke strong, even unsettling emotional reactions, or resonate with you on a deeply personal level. Some can even be a catalyst to personal growth, or plant a seed of thought which germinates for a long time afterwards. Certain movie scenes may stay seared in your memory for the rest of your life. And all this for just an investment of a couple of hours. Never before have so many interesting films been so widely available, and the meticulous restoration work and ever-increasing resolution and fidelity of today's technology can deliver the experience of an older film with startling realism. Somebody living 50 years ago had essentially zero chance of ever seeing a film more than once, unless it was still playing in the theater or happened to be on TV. And most existing films simply couldn't be seen at all, except by a tiny handful of people. We living in the early 20th century have no excuse for not taking advantage of this gift we've been given. On a lighter note, through cultivating an interest in older films, you may even learn to love the campy acting, endearing special effects, and glued-on beards, which often come with the vintage cinema territory. In this show, I'll make no particular effort to be objective. All of my personal biases and blind spots will be on full display. I encourage you to agree or disagree with me. I'm always open to other perspective and the possibility that I've misunderstood or misjudged things. Much of what I find meaningful in any particular film is how it resonates with me personally, and so much of our experience of a film comes from our inevitable projection of our own assumptions and values onto the images we see. In a literal sense, we may be all watching the same thing, but in a very real sense, we're all watching and perhaps even creating our own movies. My purpose in the Vintage Cinephile is to encourage you to appreciate older movies as much as I do, and I'm excited to be taking this journey with you. I hope we can all learn from each other along the way. Thank you for watching. See you next time.